Being the order. Is there any? Okay. Any public comment for closed session items only?
I do not have any on text.
Nothing on Zoom, nothing on email, sorry.
Okay.
Was the front door, is it accessible just in case?
Yeah. Do you want to just?
I didn't see
Do
it.
Just because it
call out.
was stuck before, just in
Yeah,
case.
we don't want to give anybody the wrong impression if they happen to be out there.
Oh, gosh.
That thing sticks.
I'll let Steve know.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks, Linda.
Okay. Safe to say, let's go with roll call.
Trustee Rodriguez,
Here.
trustee Jackson Miller,
Here.
trustee Donnelly,
Present.
trustee Gonzalez,
Here.
trustee Friedman.
Present.
Well, that was out of order. That threw me off.
You're asleep.
I know, I'm awake now. Okay, we are going to convene the closed session. And off we go.
We go. Thank you, Linda.
The real property.
George is
Not
gonna
the
come
fake.
in.
No fake stuff here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see what she does.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And George has us up and running. Good, thank you.
We got the
George.
thumbs up.
Okay, first, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I get to lead everybody tonight. So place your right hand over your heart and ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And it is a tradition to read our mission statement, so I will do that. Staff, students, parents, and the community share the responsibility for each child's success. We are committed to ensuring that each student develops the skills and confidence for lifelong achievement and is prepared to make a positive contribution to our world. And with that, is there a motion to adopt the agenda as it stands?
I'll make the motion, Amanda.
Jen, I'll second.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None, okay. We have nothing to report out on closed session. Consent agenda, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as it stands?
Jen, I'll make the
First,
motion.
Ron second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'd like to buy 4 of those computers.
Oh.
All that are on there, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, all right. I thought you were gonna buy some valves or something.
I know.
All right, I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy some Azus.
There you go.
Okay, so we have, next item is public communications. I think we have 2. Well, we're gonna speak tonight. And so 3, okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read our guidelines for public communications. Members of the audience are welcome to address the Board of Trustees during public communications regarding items not listed on the agenda. For items not on the agenda, we request that you fill out one of the forms available at the sign-in register and submit it to assistant to the superintendent prior to opening of the meeting. 3 minutes may be allotted to each speaker and a maximum 20 minutes for each subject matter. The trustees cannot take action on these matters unless such matters are placed on a future agenda according to law. If the item is on the agenda, you will have the opportunity to speak at the time the agenda item is discussed. Please address the board president, and these proceedings are video recorded. Board members shall hold the education of students above any partisan principle, group interest, or personal interest. So I think we have different subject matters here. So how about if I start with Iwalken? Hello,
It's Thea.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So a couple things I wanted to bring to the board, starting with dress code at SoCal. I talked to Scott about this. I've talked about all these issues with Scott on last Friday. So dress code they've been enforcing a dress code that doesn't exist. I've spoken with the principal. I've had meetings with other principals, with other parents, with the principal, and it's still going on. I think that's kind of enough said. I mean, I can go on details, but I don't really know what else to do. My daughter was never dress coded, but she's scared to go to school because she's worried she's going to get dress coded in front of her peers. Incredibly disruptive to her education. That's number one. Number two, I'm confused about our COVID policy for what we're allowed to do. This Friday, we're going to have basically 400 students running around a track in 2 different groups, but we can't walk around the block for Halloween. So my question to the board is, what COVID guidelines are we following for activities? This Friday is fundraising, Halloween is not. It's the only difference I can see. We go on field trips, we do all sorts of stuff off campus. The walk around the block is a really important thing to our community and so on and so on. I mean, to me, it goes without saying, if there was a restriction by the California government, I understand, there's no restrictions. They're outside, they're not near other people aside from walking around the block. People don't come close to them. It's just, I don't really understand it all. I would love some clarity on that. Number 3, fingerprinting for volunteers. Incredibly difficult for a lot of our parents. They have to do 3 steps, a form to Miss Diana Damer, a form, then they come here and pick up a form. Then they make an appointment and they go down to the county. This is all stuff that I have the means to do. Other people do not. Also, the form is only in English. That was the other thing. So many of these forms, including these, only in English. I'm so confused with our district, how that is happening in 2021. Thank you. And just quickly to the mission statement, positive contribution to our world. I love that. And that walk for Halloween is a huge thing for our community. People love that. And they love to see the kids who they're supporting to be educated there. And I think it makes a huge difference. And I understand we're thinking safety, but we're also thinking we need to keep that connection with the community. It's been lost for 1.5 years. And for this Halloween, those 5th graders, this is their last fun time. Then they go to New Brighton, which we all know is no fun. No, I'm just kidding. But it's not, it's not the same. My 5th grader didn't get to do it last year. Now she's not going to get to do it this year. And my question is, what else are we going to do throughout the year that we're not going to let them do? Because of whatever it is, whatever guidelines. I don't know. I don't understand what guidelines we're following. So thank you for listening and good night.
Thank you. Okay, next, Jennifer Flanagan. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you.
My name is Jennifer. I have 2 kids also at Soquel Elementary. And my point, or what I wanted to bring up tonight was Ida's second point, also regarding the Halloween parade and our back to school barbecue was canceled. A lot of these outdoor events are really, really fun for our kids and our little community there. And my understanding also is that we're following the state guidelines, which do not have outdoor restrictions. And like Ia mentioned as well, a number of kids are now going to miss out 2 years in a row. And especially my older one, he loves coming to school for those really fun events. And like she mentioned, again, they're not going to have a lot of those at New Brighton. So I would like to know why we're kind of imposing other restrictions on top of the state guidelines. But thank you for everything you guys do for the kids. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
you.
Okay, Marilyn. That's it, right? Hello.
Hello, you say the most important thing is the education of children. For them to survive, they have to be in a healthy and safe learning environment where they can indeed learn. And microwave radiation from Wi-Fi and other technology interferes with children's healthy functioning. This board over the years has been presented, maybe some of you have been on the school board for over 10 years. I gave a presentation on this in 2009. I have copies of the documents that were submitted. Nina Beatty in 2013 before the school board did another presentation and submitted many documents of the harm of wireless microwave radiation. And here's another one. And I have to say it's very disturbing. I taught for 30 years, and I taught in Paro schools where there were pesticides next to the field. And I had to go outside my classroom door once when the grounds person wanted to spray pesticides. I go, no, wait, children are here. And I feel that way with the wireless radiation. This is dangerous. And when you are informed that if something is dangerous and it's been documented, and you proceed with the harm and increase the harm, this is a class 2B carcinogen, according to the World Health Organization. I don't know, what do you call that? Irresponsible, abusive to children? I consider it an assault. And I'm really perplexed that so few school board members and elected officials are not taking action to stop this known harm. Poisons are damaging, whether it be radiation, pesticides, the toxins and the shots people are getting that are well documented, chemicals used in the schools. So I'm going to leave you with this article, and I wish there were just one person who would say, look, this is a problem, and we have to reverse our direction. Wired technology is much more secure, and it's not emitting radiation. So this is called Time to Remove Wi-Fi from Our Schools by Mary Atkins of Citizens for Safe Technology. And she knows of different dangers. She's a mother, so you can take one and pass the rest down. And there's also this little caption, student safety for Wi-Fi. And here are some of the symptoms. Altered brain waves and behavior. Don't we see that in our children? Altered blood glucose in the brain. DNA damage is caused by this exposure.
Marilyn, sorry, but it's 3 minutes is up.
Leakage
I'll
of the
give you
blood-brain barrier.
Extra seconds there too to top it off. So
Okay, that's it. I have copies of what was submitted years ago. It's all on the-
and you left the copy. Thank you. Well, thank you, and good seeing you again. Okay, so- Okay. There we are. Okay, do we have any public communications via email? Zoom, not Zoom, but
Nothing on text.
email, or,
Nothing on email.
okay, very good. Okay, next item is 6A, which is information regarding election of board members, and I'll turn this over to Scott.
Yes, so the CVRA is the California Voting Rights Act, and it basically encompasses the transition, the potential transition from general election to by trustee area elections. In 2019, just to kind of set up where we are now, this board passed a resolution to begin the process, but was waiting for census data. And at our last board meeting earlier this month, the board adopted a re-intent resolution to re-engage this process. Also at the last board meeting, we heard from demographer Dave Sturtz with Cooperative Strategies, and he will be here tonight again to present information on the process and criteria for ultimately drawing trustee area boundary maps, which will properly set us up for the second of 2 required public hearings. And with that, I'm going to see if our demographer is intended to be with us here virtually, and to see all of that. Like I just think it and I'm happy. Hello, how are you tonight, Dave?
It's just magic. Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Turnbull, for having me and members of the board. I'm here with Ryan Tung as our attorney partner on this process. So ready to go when you are. All right, so I'm going to share my screen.
Thank you.
And the data that you see, the presentation that you see here before you is no different than what we went over the last time about the California Voting Rights Act and its provisions. Ryan's partner, Lise, went into great detail on the history of the act, its implications.
Hey, Dave, just a second. We're going to turn a little technical thing on our end. We're going to turn the volume up. Can you grab that remote right there from me, Linda?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
what you asked to turn
Yeah,
it
yeah,
up?
yeah.
Okay,
Can you turn it up, please?
just grab the remote and pass it over if you don't mind. Thank you. I mean, I'm sure you could do it too.
Sophie just put on the ball game.
All right, let's try that. Thanks. Sorry for the interruption, dude.
Not a problem at all. So again, just to recap, in our meeting just a few weeks ago on October the 6th, it was the first presentation of this document right here, going through a brief synopsis of the California Voting Rights Act, its implications, going over the history of your deliberations about it and decision to move forward with this process. This is the second meeting in this series. The point of this meeting is the hearing. It's a public hearing. It's really more for me to hear you. It's to go back over those key parameters that our demographic team, we have to consider when developing the options for boundaries, which we'll submit to you on November the 17th. Between this meeting and that meeting, we will be creating multiple different scenarios for your district about how you could comply with the CVRA, given those different parameters that we work within. I'll review here, or rehash rather, again in a moment. But an important part of those parameters in determining the boundaries is also listening to you as school district leadership and what you've been hearing from your communities about when we look at your community, when we look from the bird's eye view, the demographer's view, what can't we see that we need to consider when looking at putting district boundaries together, trustee area boundaries together. For example, whereas a major road may divide a community, for all intents and purposes, they may function and have similar common spaces and common activities and just consider themselves a whole. Well, we may not be able to see that. Our map may show that these are two separate communities. You may tell us that they function as one. Those are just a sort of a trite example of the kinds of things that I'm hoping to take notes on tonight from you all. So you're not going to see new information tonight. I'm hoping to gather some insights from you about how to best understand your community outside of what we can see in the census data and from our maps. We'll review with those scenarios with you the first time on the 17th, allow time for a Q&A at that moment, ask that you take those and work with your constituents and feel free to disseminate in any way that makes sense to you to get further feedback from your stakeholders. Coming back on the 15th of December with that feedback in hand to, much like this session, allow me to take notes on your feedback about the pros and cons, benefits and challenges of the different scenarios that we'll present. Coming back again to wrap that up with the final edited versions of these options on January the 19th for your hearing and deliberation and ultimate decision about which of the scenarios makes the most sense for you. That's a decision, obviously, your purview, and it's our job to make sure that we answer your questions and get you data, get you scenarios that match the criteria and respond to what you tell us. So I'm not going to go back over some of the legal aspects of it. I'm certainly outmatched for that at Ryan here tonight, and he can dive into that more if need be. But I wanted to stop after I review these 7 points. So we are looking at trying the best we can to make sure every area contains an equal number of inhabitants. And so what we do is we take the population at large, divide by the number of trustees that you have in your district, and that is the magic number that we're trying to get within 10% of on the net. And drawn, of course, to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act to make sure that we are respecting and looking at not unduly dividing or diluting protected class citizens, looking at making these boundaries compact, contiguous as much as possible. Again, looking at making boundaries that follow natural made, man-made geographic features that also work within 10% or less of a variance from from what our ideal target, and just make geographic sense. Respecting communities of interest as much as possible. This is part of that feedback we need from you, is defining that and understanding what we can't see in the census data, mention the geographic features, respecting incumbency if possible. What are other related boundaries that are drawn that can be referenced, that could make sense? And then et al., right, other local considerations of the geography of the school boundaries themselves as they exist, the locations of the school sites. When creating these boundaries, how will they overlay your existing boundaries that you use for your operations? That's enough for me talking at the moment. I wanted to now pause and field any questions you may have about the process that my team will pursue between now and November 17 to rate these scenarios. And secondarily, take some notes and listen to you as we go to, maybe looking at a map of your area. What are some of the communities of interest, the local considerations that I can't see that I should? So with that, I'll cede the floor.
Okay, any questions, comments from the board regarding this?
Well, I just want to clarify. So right now we're doing the information item, right? And this is a time when you would like to hear from us as trustees.
Yes, ma'am, that's
Put into
correct.
these considerations.
Mhm.
And then we'll have the public hearing which follows. So is that when the public, if anyone in the public wants to weigh in, is that at the public hearing or at either option?
So yes, and
Okay.
so these dual purpose as the public hearings as well. And so much like we had comments and other topics here prior, certainly invite you to invite your constituents to speak accordingly at the subsequent meetings. By all means, hosting listening sessions as you see fit, in the manner you see fit, virtual, in person, otherwise, surveys, what have you, to collect stakeholder feedback in the way you know best in your community, and then bringing that to our attention when we meet again.
Right. I'm sorry, I maybe should have clarified that a little bit more, but if we do have members of the public either here in person tonight or on text, et cetera, should they make their comment on this item, with this informational item, or should
yes,
they
ma'am.
do it on the public hearing, which is our next item?
Yes, ma'am. More than welcome to make that this evening, and
Okay.
I'll note that accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Got it.
Mhm.
I mean, I have some ideas around the map, but I've been hogging time if anyone else wants to talk.
Well, yeah, actually, on the map there is that Cliff Drive should be referred to as Portola.
Yes.
And then page 10, where the breakup Highway 1 Cliff Drive should be Portola. Cliff starts where Portola and Opal Cliff Drive come together at 47th, and then that becomes City of Capitol, and that becomes Cliff. So it's kind of, in Santa Cruz, streets tend to change their name as you're driving, but the main arterial section that you're referring to should be Portola Drive.
Yes, sir. That is correct. And I apologize. It looks like what I kind of looked at what happened, and it looks like just given the text size that was blown up, sort of exaggerated for easy viewing in this format, really shifted where that where the street really is relative to the indicator. So it's thrown off, and I apologize for the visual.
Well, just south of Cliff Drive is Opal Cliffs Drive.
Yeah.
So there could be a confusion with the public of dividing Opal Cliffs Drive instead of Portola there. So yeah, you have a Cliff and Portola kind of close together right there.
Absolutely. And I made that note to our team when we are creating the scenario maps. They are sort of a different aspect. It's not sort of a small snippet for a visual. In this case, with the exaggerated text, it is more of a full bleed, and so we'll have a little bit better detail. So we'll make sure to get that right when you see these relative to the scenarios.
Enough my piece. Anybody else have any? Bill?
So on the same slide,
So last week I asked you about the white area on here. This looks like I guess the corrected slide. So it seems to me that the data is corrupted or your application is buggy. Because I think that the area north of the orange stuff is also unincorporated. But you show it here as white. So does that mean that there's nobody lives there? And so that's why it's not showing up as being unincorporated? So that's my question. And if the data is corrupt or the application is buggy, then do we have to start all over again with correct maps?
You're saying that this orange area here
Is correct?
is not unincorporated.
No, I'm saying it is.
Yes, and that
I'm
is
saying the white
the
area is unincorporated, but you show it as not being unincorporated. So I think your data is corrupted or something because it's not showing that area as being unincorporated. It has no jurisdiction.
so the to make sure I'm following, the dark black line does show the exterior of your district boundary.
Okay.
So the gray areas outside of that would be outside. That white area is captured. It is more sparsely populated, but it is captured in the sum of your population.
But is it unincorporated? It's not orange. You didn't color it orange. So that makes me think the data is screwed up.
Well, this is pulled directly from what's provided in ArcGIS, which is also our national registry there.
I think the data
So-
is corrupted.
But
Well, no, actually, the orange is the community of Soquel, which is the unincorporated area. And that's considered, and the white is kind of outside of the community of Soquel, and it is, less inhabited.
So is it county? Is it Capitola?
No, it's all count, yeah, it's county.
So it's unincorporated. So it should be-
Exactly, yes.
Should be orange.
is that something you can take a note on
Did
and,
you look
and,
at the
and
legend?
follow
Yeah,
up
I can
with?
take a note on it. I can tell you that from the matter of population count, I think we don't have any impact here, but I see what you're saying, and I will make note of that. And before our meeting, I'll send a message on through to you all with the notes and findings and any edits.
And is this,
You already looked at this. We asked about this last meeting, and so I'm guessing this is the best you can do.
This is the same presentation, so they haven't taken.
This is
that
the
into
same
account.
presentation. That's
You
correct.
didn't look at it. Okay, got it.
and is this is the GIS, like, I forget what it stands for, but isn't it like a government data, like it's what's used to
It's
by the
geographic
elections
information
department,
system.
to say it, sorry, say it again?
Geographic information systems.
So this is not data that your firm particularly like pulled together. You got it from this resource that all governments and agencies.
It's the template that we all license to pull this data down. It's the science, and then the art is the crafting of the boundaries from it. So this is that official data there, but I do recall the conversation about the unincorporated. To be honest with you, sir, I in the first question in my notes that I took down, I misinterpreted your question, I was thinking you're referring to more whether habited or uninhabited, not corporated or unincorporated. So that is on me. You're correct. You did ask about that before. So I have the note correct this time.
So my concern is that we fix that, but also if that data is not right, what other data is not right?
Well, I can certainly show you all the basis documents when you see the scenarios as to where the data is coming from. It's coming straight, the population data coming straight from the same database that is used statewide. It's the California State database that they curate and then release it all. So that's uniform across the state everywhere. Yeah, there's no variance in that at all. And same with this.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like the numbers are correct. It's just the boundary
Yeah.
may be incorrect. I mean,
The numbers, I have, yes, I'm quite confident in our numbers. They are from the source, straight from the source, so to speak. The boundaries as well, straight from the source. So that the school district boundary as itself, no question. The population, no question. Sort of the organization of that boundary, whether it's unincorporated or not, I will have to double check, but I will get back to you before our 17th meeting.
I just want to make sure that the people who live in that spot are counted.
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely.
I have a comment. Just tell me if it's, if you got, somebody else wants it. I have a comment about the considerations, right? Because this is a time when you'd like some feedback from the board.
Absolutely, please.
So my own thoughts in terms of how to divide that heart-shaped map up into the 5 districts. To me, it's important that no one seat, that if possible, each trustee area includes some unincorporated county. Well, I don't know if this makes sense, but to look into some unincorporated county, some city of Capitola, or not in the alternative, not have 1 or 2 seats that are solely in a city and not also representing some of the unincorporated areas.
I see.
Does that make sense? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think maybe geographically, it might not make sense that every trustee area has some of Capitola, but in the alternative, just that we don't have any seats that are only city of Capitola, right? Just to provide that representation, communities of interest. And I think we talked about
So you're
this.
saying split Capitola? Then having 2 representatives in Capitola, splitting Capitola?
I'm saying that I would like, so that if a seat is primarily city of Capitola, that it also have some of the unincorporated
Oh, okay,
area,
yeah.
which I think
Yeah.
is reasonable given our geographic boundaries and everything, right? Opal Cliffs is unincorporated, to the
Mhm.
closer
Yeah.
towards Aptos is unincorporated. And then similarly with schools, that we not have a situation where any particular trustee area is only connected to one school, if that is possible. I think that's on there in terms of a consideration, or it's something that we've discussed, but again, creating situations where trustees don't feel like they are particularly representative only of
Mhm.
one particular school or one particular community,
okay,
because
right.
even with these trustee areas, each trustee is a person governing the entire district.
Mhm.
That's it for me.
Yeah, that's noted. Thank you.
And I want to go back to my other request at the last meeting, and I guess you're still working on it, is a map with our attendance boundaries. So hopefully that will
Yeah.
come out sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah, that when we were looking at the scenarios, the attendance boundaries, that is one of those considerations that we have here in developing that, the 7th check mark, if you will.
Right, we were going to get a map of the boundaries.
Yes, that is going to come when you see the scenarios. Like I'm looking at one printed off for tomorrow, meeting tomorrow with the district who's at that level, at that stage tomorrow, and we will provide that as a reference along with the scenarios so you can compare and contrast.
So we won't see that for a couple of weeks then, right?
Yeah, that'll be on the 17th, and that's one of those documents that it's no problem. I can, along with the response to the unincorporated area, I can get that to you prior to the 17th as well.
I'm done.
I'll say something. One of the points is respect incumbency, if possible. I wanted us to consider the fact of moving that to a lower level of importance, just because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if we draw boundaries completely based on the current makeup and they just don't follow the other rules, I just feel like it would be artificial. I think it's just better to draw the best boundaries we can. If it works out for who is currently on the board, perfect. If it doesn't, that's kind of the way it goes. That's just my opinion. That's it.
So are you saying we should have an election before 2022?
No, I'm just saying we should just draw boundaries as we think they make sense.
Right.
With that element having a lower importance. Some of us may live really close to each other and perhaps it would just make a boundary that makes no sense
Right.
other than for that factor. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Like, maybe we can clear this up. I think the incumbency is only lasts until the next election. So that would be in 18 months or whatever from now.
Then we still have to draw boundaries
Yeah.
Before,
ahead
yeah.
of time.
Right,
you
so the
can- but you
boundaries
can
that
finish
we're
out the
considering
term, yeah.
approving in January, February, whatever the timeline is, that they shouldn't be drawn based on where we all currently live, right?
We also don't want to make that
Yeah.
information public necessarily.
of
So
course.
it just kind of makes sense to not have that as important of a factor.
Understood. Then I will parrot back what I've heard at the end to make sure you know that I have your notes.
Okay, anything else from the board? Okay. All right, any comments, questions from the public before we move on?
I would love to ask, just a clarifying question. I don't really understand the change. I got the email that Scott sent about the change, and I don't really understand who would be voting and how it's shifting. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yeah,
You
go
wanna-
ahead, yes, yeah, or you want to address it, or? you-
I'll be glad to address it, and Ryan can fill in any gaps or anything of that nature. So the California Voting Rights Act was passed with a thrust of equity. And that is, I'm putting this in very simplistic terms to make sure that in a large, area of land that a typical school district encompasses, that no one small area is controlling, the voting rights, the decision-making of that. And so it especially kind of applies to larger school districts where, the desire was to have those decision-making authorities kind of spread out over the whole geographic area and not have one big geographic area of a boundary controlled by one small subsection. And so districts go through this process of seeing what those divided up maps may look like, kind of like as Amanda was saying, do you kind of take a slice of each area, especially in a unique area like ours, where part of it's city, part of it's unincorporated. How do you kind of slice that up in a fair and equitable way over these next several months? That's what the board and our community will engage in, giving this kind of input to our demographer. And then decide to whether to go forward with that kind of election. So rather than saying we're voting for the whole Soquel Union Elementary School District, folks in one particular trustee area section of the district will vote for a representative from that section rather than general election. Hope that helps a little. Ryan, you want to fill in anything I might have missed?
Well, that was a great explanation. But I will add the big crux of what the change that the board is going through right now is the actual method of election. So as the superintendent said, right now the board is elected at large, meaning that board members can live anywhere within the district and voters vote for all board members on the board. The change will be to adopt what's known as by trustee area or by district elections, where the board members will live in particular trustee areas and registered voters in those particular trustee areas will vote for that seat on the board. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarification as well.
So what happens if the trustee moves?
You have an election.
Yes. So if the transition has occurred already, and so as a baseline level, this transition will happen over a 2 election cycle period, because the current board members now still retain their at-large seats through the full term. So it'll be sort of phased in through 2022 and through 2024. Once it's phased in, if a board member moves out of their trustee area that they were elected into, then that will create a vacancy. And the district board will go through the general vacancy process of either filling that seat by appointment or calling a special election.
So for instance, it's just not moving out of the district, is that you move across the street, that could put you out of your area. And then it would have to go into appointment procedures.
Thank you.
And I think we have links on the website that kind of has information, the history of the California Voters Act, and then the process we're going through as well.
Yes.
To that, okay.
We have two comments from the
So
public.
I have this young lady here.
Excuse me, I'm going
Who
to
this room
use
is named after.
Ted's- use Ted's,
Yes,
because I have
yeah.
more than one question. I'm curious to know what will happen if nobody from an area runs for an election. Then what?
I'm gonna defer to Ryan on that one if you don't mind.
Appointment, right?
Well, but you have to have an
Right,
application for an appointment.
So nobody runs for the seat and nobody wants to be appointed from a certain trustee area. That's the question, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's the same sort of process governed by the education code that would happen if, if 2 seats are up for election at large now when only 1 person ran, and you'd have to find, the process is known as failure to elect, and it essentially kicks off a process where the board would then look to try to appoint someone for that seat. So it's the same, it's a similar process as to what would happen now if someone didn't run for an at-large seat.
So let's enlarge that. What if you have a failure to elect and you can't even find anybody who wants to apply for that position in that area?
Yeah, so this is where the education code gets a little wonky. But the general idea would be, I believe that it would be an appointment or a special election, which you can see that can kind of get a little bit cyclical. Usually what happens, it's very rare in my experience that there is trouble recruiting or having people run for particular seats. And if there is sight of that potentially happening, school district administration can work on an outreach effort to try to garner interest in the public in running for the board. So a long story short, I feel like it's something that is rare, but there are ways to address it if need be.
I might just chime in and say, and I'm speaking to the board guru here, so it's always something you fret about when there's an open seat and not an election, right? And then you hope that somebody steps up to be appointed. And you fret even in a general election if that doesn't happen, and in how you have to go about proceeding. Maybe as your question would, if nobody runs from that section, does it ever default to a general election? Is that like a follow-up to your question? Or I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but that question has been asked to me, so I thought maybe that's where you're going. And I think the answer is no, right, Ryan? So that if just because nobody chooses to run for that seat or be appointed from one of the trustee areas, it doesn't ever automatically default to then anybody from the general population of the district could then be appointed, right? That's not an option.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We just have to make it look really good.
Can we compel a former board member to move?
We're getting into something here. I don't know about
And another question that arises from your presentation, can boundaries be redrawn before the next election? Or can they only be redrawn after the census, 10-year census?
Yeah, and I can answer that question for you. There is a process in the education code that allows the school district board to work with the county committee on school district organization to rearrange trustee areas at any point in time. So it doesn't have to be in this tight window that we're in right now, right when the new census data comes up. So there is a process where you can do this when the new census data comes out in 2031 for the next set, but there are mechanisms in the law that allow the board to make changes prior to that time.
Thank you. And then my last question is to the board. Who's going to do the slicing of the district? Is this a committee or is it your yeah, right.
With demographer with lots of input from the whole school community.
So the school board is going to be very involved in the actual slicing of the district. Is that correct?
So
I-
we will present options, scenarios, given these parameters, the data that we have through the census, through the state, through the GIS services. So our job is to create the scenarios that comply with CVRA, that account for these different parameters, the notes that were provided to us tonight. And then the school board looks at those scenarios, looks at the benefits and challenges of them, suggests any potential edits. We respond accordingly. And then the school board would ultimately select the scenario that best fits their division in their mind.
So I didn't hear any input from the public in what you just said.
So the duly noted, the comment from the board, I looked at in the board as a representation of the public. So the comments like this tonight, the comments that you receive from the public through any other meetings that you have external to these board meetings, all of that coming funneled through you, either in this setting directly with speakers like we have here at the moment, or from speakers folks that you speak to along the way, that you bring their voice as their representative to our next meeting.
Right.
Will there be an opportunity to get possible maps and then for the public to still comment on those, kind of get comments beforehand, then draw some maps, then get some more comments, just so we can kind of keep just making changes to the maps?
Sure. What we'll see is when we deliver the maps on the 17th, and there's some interim deliverables that I have here noted to get. But when we deliver the scenarios there, by all means, have between then the 17th and what's the next date?
December 15th.
December 15th. Yes, that would be the window to come in, mark them up, have questions, come on the 15th with those questions, either transmitted through your trustees or directly in comments like this.
And if I can add to that, what we'll do is we'll work with the district and with David to get those maps prior to the 17th, because we'll actually be posting it 7 days in advance. So that those maps will be up on the district website, so the public can actually review it before the next public hearing.
Correct.
Thank you to the board. Thank you. This is a huge undertaking. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Sandy.
Sandy.
Another question, Scott, as an aside, have you received comments from the community?
I have not yet, but I expect to once we get those other forums. Plan to do one virtually and one in person so that folks can have a chance to have input on whatever manner is most convenient for them within that window. So.
For me, when city schools did this, it was really once you saw the mock-ups of the
Yeah.
maps, I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I'm involved. When it's just like the text, as you know, I
Yeah.
like visualization. So once those different things come, then people will be like, oh, I see.
Yeah.
I don't really like that one. And that's when
Gotta have something to jump off of.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And it would be helpful if, in addition to the maps, maybe there's a little explanation of what this map is trying to accomplish, what this one is trying to accomplish, so that if people are just kind of, looking at something, then they have that information, even if they don't attend an information session, they can just kind of read it and understand why it was drawn this way.
Yeah, good point. The deliverable, if I may, for these scenarios include, the population data, population variance, raw numbers and percentages, the raw number, percentages, population variance by ethnicity, for the total population, the 18 and older, and the school age population, the voting age. And you'll be able to see there in the different scenarios will, of course, sway those percentages and variances differently depending upon, which of the 7+ criteria are, more strongly favored, if you will, in each scenario.
And may I ask the district if it's not, if the deliverable, if it's not in plain language and available in Spanish as well, can the district make sure that when it's posted, it's a clear explanation of what it is and is accessible to everyone.
Absolutely. We'll make it as accessible as possible.
Okay. Okay, so nothing else from the board or the public? Do we have anything, text, emails, or?
Nothing on text.
We have 2 email comments, but they are not on this agenda item. So when we complete this agenda item, I can read them into the record.
Or another?
They're for a non-agenda item.
A non-agenda
item.
item for
Yeah.
okay.
For public comment. So I can wait till
Okay.
we're done with this item and then I can read them into public comment.
Maybe we can
How
get
about
through
it?
the
We're gonna
public
do, we'll
hearing.
do
Yeah.
public hearings, and then before standing reports, you could read those. So we'll just glide into the, if we're done, we're gonna move into our public hearing. And Scott?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think they may stay on for this
Yeah,
one.
they're gonna stay here.
All right, thank you.
So item 7A on our agenda is the public hearing. So just a little setup in the previous item. I had mentioned that we would be having the second of 2 required public hearings on this topic of trustee area map creation process. I'd also like to note that besides the required level of communication, our district is invested in not letting this fly under the radar.
Mhm.
As such, an email has been sent to all parents. And on this topic, a web page is devoted to the topic and is part of our district's website now. And information has been shared on social media, and we will continue in that vein of not just doing the minimum, but really making sure that nobody is caught off guard by this topic being discussed and processed in our district. So with that, would like to ask the board to consider opening the public hearing.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I will open our public hearing. Go ahead and just line up right there. Okay, is there anything text or email regarding this?
Nothing on text.
Nothing on email.
Oh, I'm just gonna wait a few more minutes just in case, because sometimes there's a hiccup in our
Sure.
digital world.
Good stretch.
Yeah,
There you go. 17 stretch.
okay, so double check.
Nothing yet. Nothing on text.
Nothing on email.
Okay, I will close our public hearing. All right, thank you.
Now, thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And we will get those maps and that question resolved here in the next week or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
So we're gonna do a public comment via email. We do this because of delays with our digital world, I should say. So I'm gonna go ahead and allow the public comment to be inserted before our standard reports.
We have 2 comments, both on the same topic. Comment number 1 is from SoCal Elementary Events. It's titled Dual Immersion Concern. Parents at SoCal L are concerned about the dual immersion program being implemented next year. Teachers and parents are concerned this is being done without a request for feedback from us or discussion to make it successful. With so many needs at our school with learning loss and emotional needs, it doesn't seem like this should be a spending priority.
Is there a name attached to that email at all?
It just says SoCal Elementary Events as the email address.
Okay. Thank you.
Comment number 2 is titled Dual Immersion. This is from Megan Pereira, first grade teacher, SoCal Elementary School. In regards to the dual immersion program at SoCal Elementary, will you address why this program wouldn't be held at Santa Cruz Gardens instead? They have the physical space available and wouldn't have to remove a teacher each year at each grade level like we would at SoCal. Thanks. And those are the 2 comments I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, let's move to standing reports, and while you're at it, Michelle, we'll start with you.
Goodness, it seems like the last 2 weeks just flew by. We've been working in business, and we're still closing up last year, posting all of our entries, getting ready for first interim. I know the board has been, well, the board, I'm not sure if the board knows, but the board would think it was in our docket this evening that Allison Warner, our director of fiscal services, has taken a position in another district. So she is no longer with us. So I'm doubling up for a while as your director and as your assistant superintendent.
Okay.
So I've been learning payroll all over again. It's like I was a teenager. So that's kind of my world right now. I also had the opportunity this last weekend with Dr. Kiernan to we attended some PD. We're in an AXA Academy, and the PD was great. We had some really great speakers, some superintendents from across California talking about equity, which really goes in line with one of our agenda items later in the hard work that we've been doing here at our district. So to hear conversations from other sitting superintendents and from other people in a variety of different positions on their equity work in their school districts. So it's just a really great conversation. It's a really enriching PD. One of my biggest things is we've been still going every day to do Brighton for lunch duty. Kathy's numbers just keep exponentially going up. It's a blessing and a curse for her right now because she really needs additional staff out there to help with that. So myself and a couple of my staff members have been trying to get out there at least for that 7th, 8th grade rush. And it's just a lot of fun. The kids, they're an interesting group as teenagers that age. So, and the lunches she was cooking is just awesome. Also, one other thing, business service and educational services and Superintendent Turnbull and we all met with the COE, both business and educational, to discuss our budget and our LCAP. And just was a check-in with them on how we were doing and getting feedback from us as to what they can do to help us in regards to our LCAP and kind of our spending plan. So it was a really great check-in. I really enjoyed our opportunities with the COE because they're just, without them, be so lost. Their support is amazing in both veins. So, and I'm sure Jessica will talk more to that later. And that's my update.
Thank you. Jessica.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. It's great to see you from afar. I am going to give just a few updates that Ed Services has been working on since the last time we met. I will echo a few of Michelle's comments. First, our combined work with the COE with regard to the LCAP and the next steps has been wonderful. They're great supporters to our district and the districts around ours. Also, like Michelle talked about, our Superintendent's Academy has been wonderful. The focus has been leading through equity, and it's just wonderful to see 40 people who are doing what we are doing to improve the lives of students. A couple of other things, our October District Ed Tech meeting was convened last week. Representatives from each school shared what was going well and what could be improved. It's a wonderful team, and all of the benefits of their work will be memorialized in what we've agreed to as a digital newsletter, so that will come out regularly. Also, last week, the Director of Student Services and I met with our County SELPA Director for an equity discussion, where we discussed our partnership with Imperial Valley SELPA to provide leadership and PD related to special education students and equitable access for and practices. She shared that our choice to work with Imperial Valley was great since they are truly the front runners on this kind of specialized work. So we're really excited. Our PD work with our district leadership team will begin in December. Also, last week, we began an in-house new teacher training, which is a 6-part series in Readers and Writers Workshop. And we're thrilled that our former Readers and Writers TOSA has collaborated with us and offered to provide the newest teachers this top-notch training. So the first in the series started this past, I believe, Tuesday, and was very well attended. So thank you to Erica. Excitingly, we are preparing for our English learner reclassification ceremony. And our EL specialist, our EL TOSA, Jackie Gomez, and I are planning for a wonderful celebration of these students, families, and staff at our upcoming November board meeting, where there'll be some new and exciting additions to this special event. So we can't wait to see you there for that. Last week, we convened an educator think tank, which is an offshoot of our district leadership team. We discussed new and innovative ways to develop as educators to better support our students and each other. We're excited about working and collaborating with each other meaningfully on our upcoming 11/1 PD Day. On that day, we've decided we're going to focus on teammanship, pro-socialization support in SEL, as well as diving into multiple forms of student data to develop meaningful plans to address student learning opportunities lost over the last several months. Last, we are continuing to curate books for our school sites and peace libraries. They are part of our work toward culturally and linguistically responsive education. Some of our new titles include One Crazy Summer, The Rock and the River, For the Right to Learn, Skin Like Mine, I Am Enough, and many more. So those are some of our exciting updates from Ed Services this week.
All right. Thank you. Scott.
So I'll just triple down on a couple of things that Michelle and Jessica mentioned. First and foremost, that collaboration with the COE on LCAP and budget. Big kudos to the COE for their support, but also to Michelle and Jessica, because the district couldn't have two more people that are experts in their area and also collaborate to see the budgetary needs from one side and the educational needs from the other, and come up with the best plan and budget possible. So thank you for your work on that. General gratitude for everybody in the district. Continues to be a heavy lift this year to maintain in-person learning. Everybody's doing above and beyond, and just a big sense of gratitude for everybody in the district, regardless of your role. We had another session of SEA negotiations today, and that was very productive. And again, both sides coming to the table with vested dual interests on how best to serve our students and staff in the district. Last week, Michelle and Jessica and I were able to attend School Services of California training on declining enrollment and how to mitigate the impacts of it and best navigate through those very troubled waters that our district and really all districts in the county are feeling. There was a lot of information from that workshop, of course, that webinar. One of the things we learned is that Santa Cruz County is projected to be hit, let's see the right way to say this, to have the third highest level of declining enrollment in the next 10 years, according to their research. And so that is obviously, I think it was at 18%, if I remember. That could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 or 8,000 students in the county, 7,000 or 8,000 ADA. So it's daunting, but I want the board to know that we're taking it seriously and trying to learn the best ways possible to mitigate the impact of that. On the COVID front, we continue to focus on layered mitigation, most specifically with our partnership with Inspire Diagnostics and doing screening testing as well as exposure-based testing. As of today, we've administered 5,880 tests to 1,274 different individuals, students, and staff. And in a district our size, that's really something that shows the commitment school community-wide to mitigating the impact of the virus. The district now, like all districts in the county, have a webpage devoted to showing the number of positive cases across the district, both all time with our Inspire Diagnostics testing data and current active cases. Finally, the vaccine front, COVID vaccine front, you probably heard today that the FDA approved both Moderna and J&J boosters, and I won't try to pretend to be a doctor on this, but there's a mix and match element that is allowed here. And so the COE and all districts will do everything possible to prioritize educators and create convenient opportunities for those who wish to receive a booster. And for our vaccine for students ages 5 to 11, it's coming. It sounds like we were hoping that by the very first day of November, we would have a school-based vaccine clinic and able to administer that. But it looks like that we're hearing from public health that is likely to be pushed back a little bit, and that we're unlikely to be able to offer vaccines to students that age before November 8th now. We were hoping for November 1st, but we are anxious and planned and ready to go to offer convenient school-based access to parents who want their younger elementary age students and some sixth graders at New Brighton to receive the vaccine, so that we can continue to build up our mitigation strategies overall with COVID-19. And that's all for me.
All right, thank you. We have nobody from CSEA here tonight, and I assume not virtual, and SEA.
Can I stay here?
Yes.
You can, yes.
All right. SEA Representative Council met this week to discuss healthcare redistributions, negotiations, and certificated evaluations. We decided to make a practice of doing a survey each spring to determine how our unspent healthcare funds will be redistributed for the following year. As Scott said, the SEA negotiation team met today with the district administration as part of our ongoing CBA bargaining. We felt that the meeting was productive and meaningful. We offered a proposal relating to student services and asked questions regarding the district's financial projections. And the SEA is grateful for the district's ongoing collaboration and communication. We are also grateful for the ongoing on-site COVID testing provided at no cost to all of our students and staff.
Thank you, Sarah Marsh. Good to have you here tonight.
Yes. Okay, items from trustees. Anybody want to jump in? And
I'll go quick.
Okay.
One thing, our colleague, John McPherson at the Monterey COE has been appointed on the nomination committee for CSBA. So dial him up and, twist his arm or whatever.
okay,
I'm done.
thank you. Going down the line.
Nothing from me.
Okay,
I have nothing.
well, let me see. Where should I start? I have nothing to report out on, and I bought a diary, and there's nothing in my diary. Last time I forgot all the everywhere I was, and everybody's kind of reminding me. So.
See, it's fun, everybody.
Yeah. Where did I go the last 2 weeks? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to our 9A, which is a presentation regarding the draft equity impact action plan. And Scott.
I'm so sorry.
Bye,
We
Jen.
have one more comment that's come in for public comment, so I don't know if you want to do now or wait.
Can I ask a question though? Just in terms of our public comments, like coming in real-time reaction to what's happening at the board meeting and.
Well, that's something we should consider. I could see if there's a hiccup and then, and then doing it here, but now I think from now on, I don't want to start doing reactions to agenda items.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair point. I think as we've gotten used to the new virtual and then hybrid meetings, we've really erred on the side of allowing everything in. But perhaps at the next board meeting, we can make a statement that you have to have them in by a certain time. So yeah, we've definitely erred on the side of letting them in. So
Well, just to be safe too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, as far as if it's, I think we're done with public comments right now. And the point taken there too. So.
is this one
You think it's okay?
timestamped very recently? Can you tell?
This came in 3 minutes ago, and
Oh.
it is in response to a public comment that was read into record a few minutes ago.
Okay, so then.
That's right time on this point then.
Yeah.
That's not the intended purpose of allowing
Just
ones
the-
that might have been trickled in because of technology, right?
Well, like Jessica, she's, delayed right there too.
Right.
So, and then you look at our map, somebody could be up in Sand Point right now trying to type in their comment. So that's, the little area that was the northeast of the border. I doubt it, anything's up there, but it's just, just with the delay, just, let the
guess-
comments, but I could see your point.
I mean, I'm trying to make the point that we want to like replicate and respect the process for a real-time in-person board meeting. So public comment and generally like for things that are not on the agenda, the idea is there's the set time at the
Right.
beginning of the meeting
Mhm.
and we can't have a discussion on it and we don't want it to seem as though there's any kind of discussion on something that's not on the agenda. And I understand that we certainly allow for a delay if someone just didn't get something in time for internet purposes, but then when it turns into a
Right.
response to something someone
Okay.
said 20 minutes ago, or that's
No,
where
I-
it feels
I-
like we're straying from what
Right.
public
I agree.
comment should be. So that's my take on it, but you are the board president. I absolutely see
No,
to your,
no, I
your
understand what you're
call.
saying. We've taken that in consideration before too. So let's move on to 9A.
Okay.
And Scott.
All right, so very excited to bring forth the Equity Impact Action Plan draft. And I'm just gonna see if that can be shared or if I can share that myself. I did just share that with George and thinking maybe it can be shared up on the screen. But if I need to share it myself, I can do that too, I think. So while that gets perhaps addressed, I will just say that I will just kind of set up where we are with this process. So as you know, over a year ago now, the board really started engaging in this deep equity work. As I've said before, it really kind of is the best grassroots efforts that I can say I've been a part of. It didn't have to be initiative from top down. It was from all stakeholder groups in the district. We had heard a wonderful letter from our colleagues in SEA about the need for this kind of work. Right around that time, our society had experienced the murder of George Floyd and other instances of racial injustice. And collectively, we decided this is work that we had to engage deep in. We did some professional reading and we engaged with Nicole Anderson and her team that has expertise in this area and expertise in guiding districts in that area. So last year was really a foundational year of working across 3 groups. This governance team, our administrative council, and probably most importantly, our racial justice task force, which if we go to the next slide, we'll see is made up of a really powerful cross-section of teachers and classified staff and parents and administrators and board members, the appropriate number at each meeting. And so I would say it really kind of captured whenever you talk about having different stakeholder groups come together, it captured that process very ideally in that it seemed like everybody had a voice at the table and there was no group there just kind of to rubber stamp and say that that group was represented. It really is a team that came together. Last year was a real foundational year, a lot of in-depth reading, a lot of coming to common understandings about how this work can look in schools and where we want to go as a whole organization. As I said, professional reading on the subject so that, this is an area that generates a lot of passion for obvious reasons. And that passion is important, but it's also important to have kind of a common understanding of some of the foundational work. I just want to say how much I appreciate everybody that took their time last year to serve on this task force. They were all meetings in the evenings. Nobody got paid for it. Everybody was in it because it's the right work to do for our students and for our families and for our community. I kind of like to look at as last year was building the foundation. This year we're going to add on the house. And so now that we kind of have foundational understanding across all groups in the district, it's time to further engage. And that's where this equity impact action plan comes in. It's a draft. It's a draft both in content and formatting that we can get input on and bring back at the next board meeting. Rather than go through the draft here in this setting kind of page by page, we put together a presentation that is intended to capture the overview of it. And then so we'll hear the presentation and then we'll take any input on the draft. We take that back. And of course, over the course of this year, the idea is to take the action steps in the plan once the plan gets solidified and approved by this board, and to bring in the members of the Racial Justice Task Force as well as new voices to join those members and see that plan into action and into reality. So as we go on to the next slide, this is just the 3 groups that I had mentioned of mentioning of the board, the administrative council, and racial justice task force. And just so you know, I think Nicole Anderson and her colleague will be joining us. I don't know if they are on yet or not, but they're scheduled to be here. Oh, there she is right there. Okay. Again, I think it and it happens. Hello and welcome to the board meeting. And thank you for joining us and thank you for all your work. Nicole, forgive me, I forgot your colleague's name tonight. Maybe you would like to introduce her. She's new to our district, but I'm sure not new to this work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with, hello, everyone. Good evening. It's great to see you from a distance. Can't wait to see you in person. I'm joined with Deborah Keys Wright, who actually, you can see on the screen that we had kind of 3 services we were providing. You met Dr. Shelley Holt, who actually is on an airplane right now, so she couldn't join. But Deborah Keys Wright is one of our amazing associates as well that works primarily with our school boards. So as we consider, I know it's another agenda item tonight, I want to invite her so that we could reintroduce her. She got a chance, I think, to meet a few of you in the spring, I believe, but she's been watching you from a distance. But she has been an amazing colleague where we work with lots of boards around California in partnership with CSBA. And so in the potential work of year 2 with the board, Deborah is one of our key teammates who also has done phenomenal work. So we look forward to you hopefully engaging with her and meeting her. And so she's on and I'll be on to observe and share any context. And for your other agenda items, any questions for us, we'll be on as well. So excited to see you all.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Kimberly, welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Deborah, I'm so sorry.
I know you call me Kimberly. That's okay.
Is that
It's
your middle name?
a long
Is it-
night. That's okay.
What time zone are you in?
Pardon me?
I said, what time zone are you in?
I'm in Central. I'm in Nashville.
Oh, boy.
Whoa.
So I remember with Dr. Holt, she was right somewhere closer to the East Coast
Michigan.
even.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Michigan,
Woo.
right?
He's in
Okay.
Eastern. Yeah, she's
So
in
it's a
Michigan.
later night for you.
Yeah.
I'm used to it.
Yeah, we're trying to get them to move to California. They're being really stubborn right now.
Come on over. And I think it goes without saying how crucial Nicole and her colleagues work with us is, some of this is, as Nicole taught us last year, is being willing to get uncomfortable. And sometimes that's really hard to do internally. And so you need that outside voice, sometimes because it's looking at your own decisions as a superintendent or as a school community, and really being willing to delve deep and question, and having that outside expert support with that is invaluable in this process. So on the next slide, we'll just talk a little bit about why we got into this work. I mentioned this, all the reasons kind of why we decided to take this on. So I won't belabor those, as I mentioned most of those, and we'll go on to the next slide. I mentioned the foundation. The building of the norms was so crucial across all 3 groups. And again, making sure we're kind of speaking a common language and working for the same goals as you'll see throughout the draft plan. We go on to the next slide. Now here we are. We're ready to build the house. The foundation has been laid, and now we got to get the house up and running. Still a lot of work to be done. This is not work. I always harken back to when we first brought this work kind of to the system, to the district as a whole. One of the main fears that was expressed to us is this was a check the box thing, that we were going to do a couple of things, check the box and say, hey, we're racial justice experts, let's move on. There's no such thing. This is in-depth ongoing work that we are just now having the foundation laid and have a long ways to go, but we're ready to engage in that lifelong, life-changing work. The plan here is designed to be the equity impact action plans, designed to be a clear vision and a systemic approach addressing identified racial equity gaps. That's a quote right from the plan that I thought really succinctly identified the goal of the plan. It's based around SMART goal research, so that it's not just pie in the sky type of things. It's actionable work that we can go back and see whether we're moving forward with or not. Really important documents are referenced throughout. Probably the most impactful one is the article Water of Systems Change, which identifies 6 conditions of change. This article has really taken hold in our district, not just in a box called racial equity. We've talked about it in several other instances. Our ELD TOSA referenced it in presentations that she did around English language development. This is a foundational piece that has really made an impact in our district and will continue to build on. And I just like this quote from the plan: the journey to combating institutional and systemic racism must begin with dismantling internal and external barriers that may impede the work. I think that just captures the enormity of this work. And I always like to think of it as we are in the system, we are maintaining the system, and we're trying to change the system simultaneously. And that's a heavy lift, and that is the lift we are going to be engaged in. As we go on to the next slide, you will see a sample equity statement and a working equity statement, I should say. And this is one we pulled from the National Equity Project. And again, throughout the year, if the board should so choose, we can customize this as we go. This is all ongoing work. And I will just say, as I've referenced before, one of my goals this year is to engage teams in redoing our mission statement and belief statements. I think it's the perfect time because we can take some of this work around equity and infuse it into our overall mission statement and beliefs. And so we'll continue to work on that in different teams and in different settings. On the next slide, you'll see the article that I referenced, the water assistance change. This is, again, foundational to the work that we're doing. And you can see those 6 conditions of change. Really allow, rather than this is such broad work, it's nice to have some labels to kind of hang and anchor off of. And these are the different levels that, in order for real change to take place, these are the different levels that you have to be mindful of and that we'll continue to work through. On the next slide, you will see that through our work with the Racial Justice Task Force, where the real meat was done, 3 major subcommittees and focus points were identified, and they couldn't be, more clear around equity of staffing, curriculum, and student discipline. And the 3 subcommittees did deep work on that you'll see in the plan, and really gives us a jumping off point to have actionable work to do. On the next slide, you'll see that the continued work of the subcommittees will take place with these focus areas: prioritize action steps, metrics, timelines, and person responsible. And that's that SMART goal kind of process, where it's not just a vague goal, it's a goal that holds us all accountable to accomplishing it. On the next slide, you'll see just a brief overview of the subcommittee summaries and the different work that each committee focused on with staffing and discipline and academic curriculum. This is all really important work, all work that revolves a lot of self-reflection. I really look at that discipline data as something that just runs deep in terms of our systems, and whether it's consistent enough, it's not, and whether we need to improve our systems to make it more consistent across all sites. We do. That's humbling to have to admit that, and to admit that not only the inconsistencies, but how that may impact typically underserved groups. But that's the work and self-reflection that we have to do. On the next slide, it's kind of a busy slide, but again, it just kind of crafts a little bit about the goals around staffing, and just spells those out a little bit more, and the work that has to be done both in terms of policies and practices and resource flows, and how that ultimately makes mental models a focus point, and just thinking through how we go about staffing, what opportunities are given to, again, groups that may be typically underrepresented in our staffing. The next slide spells out, just in a little bit different format, the 3 goals under the staffing subcommittee. And you can see the actions spelled out in each of those, and hiring practices, professional development, and long-term trainings. And so what I really like about this work is that it kind of gives you the broad view, is that we want equity represented in our staffing better than it is now, but then it gets as specific as you want to go. And we'll continue to get more specific. The next slide focuses a little bit on the discipline part. And this subcommittee kind of took an approach to say, let's really focus on the data. And what does the data reveal to us? What may be missing? What questions do we still have? And where are the equity gaps? And how can those be addressed as we continue to refine our discipline practices for students? The next slide just spells out the discipline goals, the discipline subcommittee goals. And you can see the goals there are accurate and analyzable discipline data across the district. And a powerful thing there is that's something we want, even if we weren't talking about equity, right? The fact that we want to tie that to equity makes it an even more important goal. Common understanding of the different tiers, tier 1 behaviors, tier 2, tier 3, and appropriate responses, and making sure that the appropriate responses are the same at school X as it would be at school Y. And then sharing out community knowledge, building the community knowledge of brain growth and development in children and adolescents. On the next slide is a toolbox of actions. So again, kind of already delving into some of the specifics of how this work can be accomplished, making sure that there's a single behavioral referral system across the district aligned with our new student information system, Infinite Campus, staff trainings on the different tiers of behavior and appropriate responses, cool down and SEL oriented rooms in all schools in our district. I think Soquel Elementary has really kind of been a model in this since they have a calm room. And it's one of those things as we get these cross stakeholder groups together and they hear about the calm room and the positive effect it has on students, the questions naturally arise, why don't all the schools have a calm room? And if that's a powerful practice and a practice that's benefiting students, is that something we should make consistent?
Is that I'm so sorry, Scott. I
Sure.
don't see that slide in my docket.
Oh,
It's new.
Yeah.
It looks like there's just some edits to your slide deck. The last slide looked a little different too.
But
oh,
I don't have this
Fine.
slide at all.
okay, then that's my apologies.
Okay.
That was a mistake on my part. So I'll make sure that this one gets posted. It
Okay.
wasn't my intention. I think I crossed.
I just might ask to flip back to it later just to actually
Sure,
process it
of
and absorb it
course.
a little more.
Of course.
How do we straighten out the Brown Act though? So do we have to repost it?
Yes, I'll repost the updated presentation.
Okay.
And I apologize for that mistake. So the next slide speaks a little bit about the equity impact action plan and the subcommittee members and their thoughts on the mental models around curriculum. And so just some of the bullet points there's a need to build asset-based as opposed to deficit models of thought and approach with students and families of color. And that is a huge foundational piece in this work. Self-esteem, showing students their success in multiple areas, not just test scores, finding opportunities for cultural celebrations and families at school, and implicit bias training, which we are going through. Dr. Kiernan has picked up on this work in her training with the administrative team and principals, and we are doing some of that work in that department as well. On the next slide, just a little bit more about curriculum and the relationships and connections and power dynamics that we'll be looking into. And this is again one of those tough things to look back on, but students and families of color have sometimes reported that they have felt othered in our district, and we have to flip that. And increase staff understanding and appreciation of student and family cultures and support for SEL relationship building among students, staff, and administration. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about the policies and practices and resource flows around curriculum and the need for culturally responsive pedagogy, which we're already doing some good work in, and looking for recurring themes, looking for other schools that have already achieved success in these areas, and making sure that we're taking into account what the data and stakeholder voices are telling us. So on the next slide, you'll see goals for the curriculum team, subcommittee, the curriculum subcommittee, I should say, community building and build respect for diversity in our school and community. And then midterm, one of the goals here is to make that ELD TOSA position that I mentioned earlier, something that we continue to have in the district long-term, to make sure that that subgroup of students is, or that population of students, I should say, is well served. And then long-term, racially inclusive instruction and transformed community relationships, lofty goals. And then finally, the next step is really to bring in new voices to blend with the founders of each subcommittee and continue the work that was started last year and work on those actionable goals and make sure that that work continues to take hold throughout the district. I'll pause there. Of course, you have a copy of the whole plan. Again, the presentation was meant to try to summarize it as best as possible. And I'll take questions and any comments. And of course, we have our consultants here as well that can help with that.
Yeah, Phil.
So on this slide here, Scott, you then be adding somebody from CNS, custodial, and facilities, because I don't see them in the task force.
So what we usually do, those voices would be great to have, of course. What we usually do is just reach out and offer seats, for example, sometimes to CSEA, sometimes to SCA, and not dictate like who has to be on it.
Right.
We want this work to be, from folks who both have the time and want to be involved in it. But those would be great voices to have. So
We have like, yeah, there's none of them on the task force. It's parents and teachers pretty much.
Didn't we have a CSEA member or two? No?
We have I think an instructional aid, behavior, and I don't know if that's.
Well, and like personnel assistant.
Yeah, the DO.
yeah,
So there's that.
there was instructional aid, but yeah, your point is well taken. We'd like as representative of the group as possible, but without mandating.
And I'll add, oh, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll add a little context to that because, the tricky part about having a task force is you can't have everybody, right? Like we want to have diverse representation. You want to always blend those voices, but you also can't have everyone, it's just too hard to try to manage such a large group. So some of the things we recommend is that while people may not be a standing member on a subcommittee or the committee itself, you can also fold into that opportunities for your task force to host like listening sessions or focus groups, right? That you have them be a part of it. And you can open that up to people to come who may want to be involved, but may not be on the committee. And I think that's important because there are groups that may feel like, well, I wanted to be on it and I couldn't because I can't commit or I just, didn't know about it. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but ultimately you can't have everybody, but you do want to have representation. And so I think there's opportunities for you to create agendas for that task force to host some of those listening sessions. And like I said, focus groups. Scott, you mentioned about, more data to be collected, right? Because that helps evolve those goals. There's a lot that the group still doesn't know. So some of that, when you think about listening sessions and even opportunities to do creating like surveys, right? So that you can start to outreach to members to hear their voices who can't come to those meetings, right? And so there's a lot of ways to involve others who are not on the committee, but still represent. And so I think that's important to recognize. And part of our, in our kind of proposed work for this kind of next steps is to help you with co-facilitating that and help the task force to really be able to host that space and know how to engage more voices as you continue to deepen the work. So hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, so this is a draft, and so when we get the input from those groups that have been excluded, then we can then move beyond the draft to a final.
So that's not the process that I had intended.
Okay. So the equity, we're not going to take the equity plan as an equity process to the people, rather they have to come to us.
So I'll answer that, Phil. So we think between the three groups that were engaged, this governance team, the administrative council, and a pretty good cross-section, admittedly. I don't even know if in a cross-section you want a perfect cross-section, but it wasn't a perfect cross-section. But we think it was a good representative group that ended up being on the task force, and that they did significant work. And so now remember, new voices are being invited to this along the way. I don't see a lack of a certain department or departments as a reason to delay the consideration to approve a plan that is intended to not be an endpoint, but a beginning point to the work.
I just don't want to get the perception that there's two classes of employees here, that this group and then everybody else.
That was definitely never the intention, and as I said, there are classified members represented, certificated members represented, parents mentioned, parents represented, administrators represented, and board members represented, so.
Yeah, I see who's in.
Was there anyone who, I mean, people volunteered to be on the task force,
Mhm.
correct? It
Correct.
wasn't a question of like an overwhelming desire from staff members, community members, et cetera, who didn't have the ability to serve?
No, people were invited to take part.
Okay.
There is an element, as Nicole had mentioned, where you want it to be as good of a cross section as possible, but still not unwieldy. I think if you attended the meetings, maybe Phil, our board members that attended those racial justice task force meetings, maybe that would have given you more insight. I know you weren't one of the committee members, but I don't know. I would venture to say that the group, there wasn't a domination of one voice or another group's voice, that it was truly a collaborative process. So that's my 2 cents on that. So no, look, that's a long answer to say, I don't think that this should impede the consideration of ultimate approval of the plan.
I'm very appreciative of all of the members who
Right,
did
yeah.
put forth that it was a significant amount of time as well,
Mhm.
Right.
and a lot of work. And I think one thing that you had ended on a few comments before, which was this is not an endpoint, it's a beginning. And I feel like with any plan, it's going to keep evolving, but it's great that the momentum is going, and that's really good.
I did notice that there's 2 different lists of people who participated, and they're different. There's the one on page 40 in the presentation, and then there's the one in the actual document on page 62. And I think the correct one is the one in the presentation, not the one.
Okay, we'll make sure to get that rectified.
I think some of the names here are people who had the wrong screen name.
Got it. Okay, we'll make sure that the right list gets into the plan.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wanted to look, is that, you said page 62?
Page 62.
Oh, I see. The way I view things, what page is that on the actual action plan? I can't see page
So the
numbers on my
action
PDF.
plan is 3, yes, page 3.
Oh, okay, I'm in the wrong spot. I was just wondering, because I noticed in the presentation, there were email addresses attached, and I'm just looking up to see if it's the same in the plan, and if that's something that that all of the members are comfortable with. No, it's not on the actual action plan, right? Like if our action plan gets posted on the website, I'd hate to have a community member's personal home email address posted there if they didn't want it. I think it was just in your slides, not on the plan.
All right.
Since I'm already talking, here I go. Yes, definitely echoing everyone's like sincere and deep appreciation for the heavy lift that everyone did on the task force. And I think it goes without saying how, but I'll say it, the extra layer that the fact that the meetings were on Zoom brought to the whole thing. Like on one hand, sure, there's some convenience of being at home, but also for so many folks, right, they had kids in the background, which is always welcomed, but evening meetings when you're at home with kids who need you, that is some extra above and beyond stuff going on. So and sharing your own thoughts and experiences and going through your own implicit bias, et cetera, in a group setting while on Zoom is also something that's really I don't know if commendable is the word I'm looking for, but I just thought it really brought an extra layer to the work, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. As far as what I'd really hope to see in our final version of the plan, I just want there to be as much accountability for all of us as possible. So clear, really clear, concise goals and metrics for us to be able to then follow up on in a routine way at our board meetings as we do with the LCAP, et cetera, is something I'd like to see.
Go ahead, Bill.
So in the write-up in the section that's called addressing institutional racism starts on 64. And then you go to page 65. Right below the photo, the picture,
Mhm.
there's a sentence in there that talks about whiteness, color, and blackness. So can we add redness, yellowness, and brownness to that? Because we just got demographic information, and 22% of our population is Hispanic, 4% is Asian. So I think we need to address that here.
I hear your question. I might defer to see if Nicole has any thoughts about that.
Sure. No, great observation. I think one is the difficulty of placing an entire like dissertation about racial inequities is really difficult. So this is like the summary version of it, right? Because you don't want your document to be 100 pages. But what it does speak to is it's talking about historical. And so it's referring to the comment around what you say associated with whiteness and disadvantages associated with color. And also it does mention blackness. And this is more specifically around the institutional racism examples that were referred to based on some of the current realities when, like Scott shared, we were talking about the murder of George Floyd. So contextually, it was really speaking in that space, but it does mention color because you're right, we can mention so many colors. And remember the unpacking of this, like we don't have like space and time to put all of the historical inequities and what the definition of race is and literally go through each of the kind of nuances of the history of race and racism. So this is kind of a summary, right? So I think the reality is that if you want it to be evolved into, additional content, like we can always consider that, but I don't know if this space is really the place to collect that. I think that was more the learning that the group did together where we spent some time on it. There's several documents we shared as resources to unpack more of an evolved kind of context. But if it's something that the board, the will of the board is that you want some additional kind of layers of content added, we can definitely add some revisions. I just don't know. That's one of those things where you don't really have a period, right? You can keep going and going and going, and then you're never doing a disservice to the topic because there's just it's so much depth to it. So you let us know. As consultants, we're more than willing to make any revisions if necessary. I don't know if it's going to add to the document or take away because the purpose of this was just to give context, but it's really more of an action plan, right? So you let us know.
Okay.
One thing I already shared with you, Scott, was just in terms of the readability of the document.
Sure.
The grammar, use of passive voice, notice is prevalent and just makes it harder to understand. And then there's just some sentences that are very jargony. So I shared one in particular, it just makes it very difficult to understand. So if we want this to be accessible, and for people to be able to read it and understand what the goals are, what we're striving for, I think it just needs to be, the language needs to be simplified or just make it more accessible somehow.
Yeah. Can I ask this? I'm happy you brought this up. This is actually something that even Deborah and I, as we work with boards and you kind of go through making like an equity statement, right? And we create all this language and it's very jargony, it's very academic, right? And it's like, but yet we want to apply it to everyone in our community. And so like we have children, we have families, we have many people from different levels who, when you look at the language, like it can be very overwhelming and not as clear. So one of the things we try to do is to create the executive summary, right? To kind of summarize it and try to kind of give a little bit more clear, concise understanding. But if this is great feedback, right? If that's still like a little bit too, like you said, jargony and like grammatically, like it's a lot, like this is something that we can definitely look at, like maybe this needs to be adjusted. But that was part of why we created the executive summary, just for that purpose. Because when you read reports, they're long. It's like, get to the point, right? And so that's where the summary was involved. And then of course, towards the end, you have your action steps. So again, great feedback and something that if we need to adjust, we would. But I'm not sure, just based on the executive summary, if you even feel like that is too, again, too jargony in that space. And it's not designed to go into details, right? Because that's the whole point of the report. That was more of a summary. So definitely let us know your thoughts on that.
Would it help at all, do you think, if we kind of pulled the executive summary out as a single document, like if somebody just wanted to access that? Kind of as a support to the plan rather than embedded? Something we can consider.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, no.
Go ahead, good, go
Okay,
ahead.
I was gonna say now that the issue's been raised, I see the passive voice and I see some of the more complex sentences, which, if this is intended to be a document that we share out with our community, or at least that executive summary, I would like it to be in that more accessible, plain language, whatever the right term is, right? But something that folks would be able to understand, whatever their education level may be, background may be. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Like what you do for the LCAP.
That may be a separate document that I can work on and get input from Nicole and her team. It's kind of like this document is like the internal driving force for us, but then we could have a kind of a separate out, very accessible for somebody who just wanted to come in from the blue, so to speak, from the community and pick it up and have the 30,000 foot view. So that'd be something that I could work on, and in conjunction with Nicole and her team.
We're not gonna change this at all, because some of these sentences, even for me, I had to read them several times, and it was just challenging.
So.
And if she did, believe me, I did too. I mean, I need, I need simplification when it, with documents.
And could we put the 3 topics? I mean, it's not, there's an executive summary, but doesn't talk about the 3 areas at all. So it's not really a summary.
So like in that last sentence where it says this final report concludes with clear recommendations, would you like that to say something like in the areas?
Well, just the 3 areas,
Right.
staffing, curriculum, and, those 3.
Sure, of course.
Maybe that section could have some bullet points, so we see the 3 sections
And
visually.
And maybe if we could drop in our demographic info we just paid for, and we drop that in there just to kind of show what we are.
Okay.
What was that?
So we got demographic information.
Right, okay, yeah.
So
Right,
we
I
should
got
drop that into this summary, and that tells everybody, okay, this is who we are. We're 80% white.
Oh, I see from the, okay. Is that a good idea, you think, or? Yeah,
I don't think it's a bad idea. I do think, we want to be careful about not making one document to serve every purpose,
Well,
because I
just
think
a summary.
it'll get away from us a little bit, but.
Do you think it would be better if we were going to provide that data, if that data were our school population, as opposed to what the demographer provided, which is the whole community?
Well, we're the whole community. So, and in fact, one of the suggestions is that we take this out to the community. We're supposed to be about brain growth and all that stuff. So we're going to be out in the community with this plan.
True, I guess I'm thinking, right, like the general info of getting in the weeds, I agree, I know, or I'm saying it. But of the students that we serve, right, because there's also a general community that doesn't have school age students. So school age students in our country, the racial makeup, from what I understand of demographics, is different for school age students than it would be taking into the account of a population as a whole, including, the other generations. And then, what about, families that don't choose to go to public schools? So
Yeah, either one.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Yes.
But something that kind of paints the picture.
Duly noted.
Wow, okay, well, you get all that?
yeah,
I'll simplify something. I'm still back to where certain groups are considered as others. And I think the ultimate goal is not to have them considered as others.
Yeah.
Right, and basically what it comes down to is being inclusive, so that's my mind.
So can I just,
Yeah.
remind you all of one thing that's so important with this work? And I just love the discussion. I think this is super powerful. It's meaningful. We want you to have a plan that comes to life that makes sense to you, right? So that's very important, everything you're sharing. And remember, part of our journey this past year was governance with an equity lens. And part of that is we have to learn and study what that is. So part of your kind of discomfort is that we're still on a journey to learning and deepening our context. So that as you unpack something that's as profound as an equity plan, that you recognize that we're all still on a journey to unpack the meaning of this, right? And so even the example of data, you all have more work to do around not only collection of data, but actually interpreting what that means. Because we can say like, hey, you have this many kids based on demographics. But remember a conversation about just because a kid marks some demographic box is not necessarily what their cultural identity is. So what we want to do is kind of dismantle, again, as Scott shared, we want to dismantle some of the things that may be getting in the way of our own work, even in the name of equity. So a lot of the learning is going to happen and you're going to have some of this discomfort. So don't stress about that. That was part of why you continue your work around with your task force, right? And also making sure you all carve out that time on your agendas to do more studying of this and to learn and to read and really grow as a team. So that kind of discomfort you have of, I still don't know what this word is. What does this mean? Like the other, and like there's so much workshops just around the content. You'd be amazed. So that's why sometimes it feels a little overwhelming because you, as you know, as a governance team, you don't always have a lot of time on the agenda. And this is why we did those study sessions last year and why we always try to infuse a little bit of learning around equity. And then obviously we talked about governance, right? And effective governance practices, the role of the board, the role of the superintendent, and looking at policy, looking at your statement. So this is part of the journey. So I want to commend you on it. And even in the discomfort, know that this is part of the journey to continue to learn. And as you deepen that learning, your decisions will be more informed. And so when you're having those presentations from your staff to say, here's the data, right? Whether it's quantitative in nature, which is those test scores, right? Attendance, you name it, or qualitative in nature, which is the experiences of feeling othered, right? The experiences that your community has. Now you'll have more information and you'll have better context, and then you can make those decisions feeling very much informed and understanding like, what did all this terminology mean? So in that report, part of the long length of it is, you notice there's a glossary of terms at the end, right? And we included that because that also gives language to help understand, like, what does some of these words mean? And you can just spend time on those pages and go, oh my God, my brain is going to explode. So remember, the journey to equity work is always a go slow to go fast, but the whole point of this presentation is to have a plan so that you know where you're going, right? So you can have a focus, but know that it's not the end point. There's a lot more work to be done. So some of the feedback you gave, we're going to note it. And again, just, give direction, to us on how you want that to look. If you need some revision, it's not a problem. But I think the core of what you heard in the presentation, the slides are really clear around summarizing kind of where are you going? What is our focus area? So you don't feel like you're kind of all over the place, but that team really narrowed the focus to 3 key areas that I clearly heard, hey, let's stick that in the executive summary and just like bullet points and, really simple things we can add. But overall, I think your plan is solid, but it's not done, right? It's never going to be done. Like this work is never, it's that non-closure, right? Remember our 4 agreements? So but you got to have a starting point. And that's what Scott was sharing. You got that house you're building, you have a foundation, but we still got to put the windows on. We still have to, fix the bathroom floor. We got to, paint. We have a lot we still have to do, which is part of the work. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
That's fine. Thank you, Nicole.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you.
I have one more technicality, and I'm sorry if it seems
Don't be
strange. But
sorry.
in the glossary of terms that you were talking about, Nicole, page 95 of the docket, and the section of oppression, anti-Semitism is spelled with hyphen and capital S, and that is not the preferred way that most Jews like it. So if it could be changed, and I know this is an official document that was written by a lot of smart people, but it is simply some.
Yeah, we'll take a look. Actually, that glossary of terms is adapted from terminology from different spaces that, like, we didn't create that definition, if that makes sense. So we'll take a look at the original original document and just see like how they may have spelled. We don't usually fix anything that comes from someone else's document, but we will double check on that because you're right, like different ways that people identify and how it's spelled, that does matter. So thanks for bringing that up, and I'll note that in.
If it appears in our documents, I feel like it could be changed.
Sure.
For our purposes, I mean. They can-
Yep. Perfect. Okay. Got it.
We'll take all that input in, and this certainly may be one that requires more than 2 readings. I think that is, not something that would be a bad mark at all. This is a very in-depth document, so we'll take that input in and come back at the next board meeting with a revised version and take it from there.
If there's any more from the board, do we have anything on text or email regarding this?
Nothing regarding this topic on text.
Nothing on email.
Very good. Safe to say to go on to action items unless anybody else has anything.
There's
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 another.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Okay.
I might need a 5-minute break.
Let's do a
Letting you all
5-minute
know.
recess then.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Call it. All right.
Is there a way to pause the recording while we take a 5-minute recess?
I bet George can do that for us.
Okay.
I feel like I'm just talking to the air, and George is supposed to hear it.
I hear the door open.
Oh, there you go. You just say when you're ready. Or we're on.
Okay, we're back. Everybody back from recess. Hope you had a good time on the playground.
It was
We're gonna, on 9B, this is discussion regarding updates on LCAP. And Jessica, you still there? There you are.
I'm here. Thank you. All right. Well, I have a brief LCAP update for our board tonight related to Goal 2.1. And as this board knows, a major focus of our LCAP is to equitably address the needs of each of our learners with a special stress on English learner support. And then that's been a significant area of interest of our district and our educators. It's said that talk is never as important as the walk, and this LCAP bite will exemplify just that. On October 12th, nearly 40 Santa Cruz educators attended the County Office of Education sponsored EL Rise Elementary ELD Strand 1 training. And 30 of those 40 were SUESD educators and leaders. And that's a great number. We're really happy to see that we've had so much enthusiasm about supporting our English learners inside and outside the classroom. Specifically to these EL Rise strands, they are built to engage teachers in the understanding of typologies and diversity within English learner populations and implications for classroom practices in creating inclusive and affirming classroom environments, including work with culturally and linguistically diverse families. So as I said at the beginning, this means our district's commitment to ongoing learning to better support our English learners is a true demonstration of that walk. On this learning team, and at the risk of leaving someone out, I am joined by Millicent Frost, Noelle Ers, Callie Lyon, Ailish Johnson, Sarah Galvan, Tamara Raydell, Laura Salerno, Sarah Marsh, Mary Flynn, Samantha Rogers, Katie Shank, Desiree Satari, Ann Wilson, Tina Bonar, Heather Spring, Peter O'Reilly, Laura Johnson, Beth Willen, Jill Donaldson, Jamie McMillan, Katie Stewart, Michelle Spahn, Erica Aiken, Jane Crump, Rebecca Voigt, Ilda Hernandez Meza, Julie Livingstone, Eric Witter, and Barbara Hubner. So it is with great excitement and pleasure that I express to the board that this LCAP update really does show the demonstration of our focus to continuously supporting our English learners in the SUSD school district. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share that highlight. Does the board have any questions?
All right, gang.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Thanks to
thank
the
you.
team.
Do we have anything from the public?
I have nothing on text.
Okay.
Nothing on email.
All right. Well, thank you for your presentation
Thank you.
and all good stuff. Oh, Phil's waving.
Yeah.
I love you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to action items, and let's start off with 10A, the consider approval of the contract with Nicole Anderson and Associates and Scott.
Well, I think the presentation on the Equity Impact Action Plan probably says almost everything, so I won't speak a lot in prefacing the contract. This is deep, complex work that we're engaged in, and having expert help is not only helpful but necessary. And so we would like to continue our work, and we have Nicole with us still, just in case there's questions that she can answer. But we would like to continue in this formal capacity our work with Nicole and her team. And you will see a proposed contract spelling out what the year of building the house looks like. So I would ask that the board consider approving this contract with Nicole Anderson and Associates for the 21-22 school year.
I saw in person. That made me excited, right?
Pardon me?
In person,
Yes.
yes.
In-person study
Yeah.
sessions.
Because witnessing Nicole and the team in person and participating, it makes a huge difference. So
Absolutely.
was I allowed to make a?
100%. Yeah, no, you're 100% allowed. And I would just concur. I mean, like that's obviously how, I first had the pleasure to work with Nicole as working in person at the COE through the Equity Institute. And yeah, I agree 100%.
It looks like the first date in this proposal for the scope of work with the governance team, the first date for session 1 is right now. I mean, this meeting, is that correct? Or would we would have 3 like sessions, right?
Yeah, we would have 3 sessions. I don't want to jump in, Nicole. I'm sure
Okay.
she could explain. When we were first working on this, we were trying to line out what this would look like versus a actual board governance session. So we would have to edit some of the dates in here. So the big pieces, you know, around the number of dates and sessions.
And these are full days.
That's spelled out. Yeah.
$1,000 a day, so it's a full day.
Okay.
You want me to give a little context for that part?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, so how we see the work, we say days, obviously we wouldn't have a full like 9 to 3. We would love that with you, really would, but we know that's really difficult. And if it is something you want to do in one of the sessions, like you want to do more like a board retreat, then absolutely that's, you know, an option. But when we say full days, we refer to like if we have a 3-hour study session, right? That's part of a day, but then you also have your consultation time in between. So some of you, we always like to say, like, you know, when you want to reach out, if you need a thought partner, there's additional planning time. We're going to be in person as well. So what that now includes is travel time. It includes, you know, prep time. It's a lot that goes into a day. So even if you don't have the 9 to 3 time, if we went from, you know, 5 to 8, one of those evenings, it's still part of like a day. So we kind of look at one session as one day, and there's several things involved in that day beyond just your time together. And then you have 3 of those all together. Deborah and I have, you know, many experiences with boards where you'll have certain needs that come up in between the sessions. And you may say, hey, you know, we're having some concerns and we need you to come and observe one of our board meetings and give us some feedback on this. Or, you know, we're having an issue in one particular area based on a hot topic, right? Those are all things that you can't really plan right now. They just kind of happen. Mm-hmm. So we always like to say we build in time to be available for you beyond just like the 3-hour study session, because we know that there is more that goes into this work besides just when you see us in person with you. So we're going to be, you know, always want to be flexible and open for you as a team if you need anything beyond just the study session time, which happens often. So we like to build that into your time so that you're not in this place of revising the contract. You know, every time we go over, we don't like to nickel and dime and, you know, and look at, well, you spent this many hours and, you know, we're done. Like we don't operate that way. But we also know that time is needed. And I think you all kind of saw last year, like, it's like, God, we never have enough time, right? But you all are busy this year. And we know that the schedule is impacted. So as you know, requested, we just put forth 3 sessions. And one of the things you're going to notice is we embedded the book study in that for your particular work so that you can continue to grow and build your governance capacity through content based on the governance core book, which I believe some of you or all of you may have either looked at, referred to, read, but I think from a big picture, we use that as our content to go deeper from that board assessment we did last year and taking it and just chunking it. And we'll do like 2 sessions that are dedicated to that. And so that in itself will be part of our content building around your governance practices. So just want to be a little bit more in depth this year. We call it the 2.0 version because you all went through last year, kind of the beginning of it. But we always like to be flexible. So I always want to say what you see on the contract is kind of like, here's the plan. But we want you to know that as things evolve, if there's some shift we need to make, we're always very open to that. And Deborah, I don't know if you want to add to that piece at all, just in terms of the details of that, but I feel like I covered most of it. And again, the team, whatever questions they have is great. But
yeah, no, I agree with what you said. Yeah, it's good. And allowing that time to really focus on governance is so important. That's where I perk up when we talk about governance. So absolutely. But we're here as your thought partners, reaching out to us in between sessions. We're available. And those are things that are hard to plan. They just come up, but we are available for you.
So I would suggest that instead of in that little graphic thing, instead of saying like 3 days, it says 3 equivalent days, because this is a legal contract that we're doing. And if it says 3 days, then I want 3 days. If it's going to be equivalent days, then we should spell that out.
So just to clarify, as a consultant, we charge a daily rate. So that's where that comes from. So if you go to the bottom, that's what it actually folds into. And then what it says is the daily rate includes these services. And that's very uniform with most consultants. So that's where that comes from. It's not anything separate from what most do. And like attorneys, for example, they bill by hours, right? So it looks very different for us. It's how we normally bill. But in that day, if you want a full day, which is very different from what you normally want, then we may revise and say, hey, you want a full retreat, right? Like that requires a lot of time and a lot of preparation through that process. So we talk about what does this actually look like, but we know from what you all said you want to do potentially that you want to have study sessions and we're going to infuse this time. And so we try to look at what is a full day. The reality is that if you want to look at like, how much time do you spend? Like we can talk about what that looked like last year, but typically consultants just do a daily rate. So it's very common. And it allows you to have some flexibility as well, because the additional time you're going to need, we want to make sure we fold that in. If that makes sense. Does that make sense,
All
Phil?
of that stuff is not written in here. And so if
It's at the bottom. It's actually at the bottom where you look at daily rate. It says includes travel, prep, any expenses associated with providing services. So we
And it
always
is
put it right
consistent with other consulting
Yeah.
agreements we've done, and we
Right.
had a similar agreement last year with Nicole, and I don't
Yeah.
think it ever posed a problem with auditors or anything of that nature.
Got
Oh, good question.
So I'm just saying, if the Sentinel calls me up, I'm telling them that you're giving me 3 days, solid days.
Sentinel called you up.
We we have a handbook.
That's coming up.
It's
coming up.
It's taxpayer dollars and we're approving a contract. And so it's the letter of the
Absolutely.
contract is the law.
Yeah, I would just say that I think by going through this, we're all informed enough to either direct them to the president, superintendent, but also have that background knowledge. So it's bottom line, standard practice, the way this is.
Oh, I understand, but
So we'll have three more sessions. This doesn't count as one of our sessions, right?
No, it does not. This is
And we're
just
gonna be
the
hooked together. Okay.
and the RJTF, can you spell that out so that the public knows what that means?
That was probably on me. I sometimes gravitate towards acronyms. We've always said racial justice task force, but that's just
It's in
something I
there.
started using.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in there. It's in the section that says services. So under the governance team support 2.0, if you go to the next page where it says the 4 days, 8 half-day
I'm talking
sessions.
about this page though, the investment proposal page.
It was just so it could fit.
where the
I mean,
money
it's,
is.
but it's referenced in the document. If you see
Oh,
the
I
actual service, the details. So
Right.
sorry.
Or we can make it easy on people and just put it in there.
I will note that for all future proposals.
Well, I will, sorry, someone
Well,
else
no, I
wants
was
to
gonna
speak?
say, thanks, Phil, for,
Yeah.
you bring up some interesting points there.
Yeah.
Good questions.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to kind of move on to the 2.0 and I felt I am still uncomfortable with unfinished, whatever, with the feeling of no non-closure. There you go. Gosh, it feels so late. So I shouldn't expect that the completion of this work will ever feel fully closed, but I appreciate the opportunity to do more work and I'm excited to do it. Although I definitely do prefer doing the work in like a 3-hour study session rather than full day. I think that's just not practical.
And then as far as the book that we're gonna read, I'm a slow reader, so.
Me too.
In the comic form would be great, but otherwise, we get that on the head. All
Yeah,
right,
we'll chunk it out for you, Ted. We'll make sure. So based on your 3 sessions, the first one we'll kind of front load the book so that you can kind of get a sense of how we're going to use it. We actually give you a little gift to go with the book. Because you all, if you don't have it, we would just say, hey, you probably want to get a book for all the governance team members. And then we have an additional workbook that will supply you along the journey. But we'll chunk it out. And I think when you set the dates, that we have to keep that in mind so you have time to read it, right? You don't want to try to rush that.
yeah.
So because
Right.
usually we do it in 4 sessions, right? We're going to do this in half that time. What I would say, and we actually, because of the way we wrote it out, I think Scott, you said it, we had, kind of thought this might have been our first session, and that's where I put it in a while back. So we can actually chunk it out and revise that and make it into 3. And then what we can do is make sure whatever your first session is, we give you ample front loading time so that you can read the first, we'll probably say the first 3 chapters. And you'll actually enjoy it. For those of you that haven't read it, it actually is really beneficial, and what a great foundation to continue to build the foundation in that house, that we're talking about in terms of leading for equity. So we'll adjust that so that it's not so overwhelming, and you take your time. Ted, I don't read fast either. There's not a lot of speed readers in the world, right? There's a few, but it's not me either. So no stress, no stress at all.
All right. So with that, more questions, comments from the board, anything from the public?
Nothing on text.
Okay.
Nothing on email.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the contract with Nicole Anderson Associates?
I'll make the motion, Jen.
Jen first. Come on, tired folks. let's
I'll
go.
second.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Amanda, okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Okay. And I still think it's pretty cool that there's a high school named after your grandfather and you worked there too.
Yeah.
That's the part
See?
in this whole thing that kind of sticks out. So that is really cool. So.
We'll catch up on that story later. We'll catch up on that story later.
Yeah, no, it would be a good story to hear. So.
Thank you both for being here tonight.
Absolutely. It's great to see you all. Really look forward to seeing you in person. And so Scott, I'll follow up with you and Ted to make sure we get a good sense of when you want us to come, and Deborah and I will coordinate our calendars because she's flying from a little bit further than I am. And so we always like to coordinate that strategically. So really excited to work with you all, and thank you again for the opportunity to partner and continue. Proud of your work. You should be proud as well. You've done a phenomenal job. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look forward to working with you as well, meeting you in person.
You gonna drive in with your van? Your little trip with your van or your RV?
It's a thought. You know what? It's a thought. Deborah, please remind me of that when we do our travel arrangements.
All right.
You inspired me. I've been banning it quite a bit.
Yeah, I tell you. Yeah. I think
But
I
that's
may
on a
just
whole
make.
nother note. Everybody, okay, we better get going. Almost 5 o'clock. All right.
Night.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Okay, take care,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay, let's 10B, consider approval of the 2021 ESSER. Is there ESSER?
You got it.
Free expenditure plan. Jessica.
I think Michelle and Jessica were going to combine on that. I'm not sure
Michelle
who's,
and
I'm not
Jessica.
sure
Let's
who's
go to
going to
next.
jump off first.
Who wants to go first? All right.
Jessica, I figured I'd go first real quick and do the budget wrap up, and you can then jump in with the written component.
Okay.
So in order to receive ESSER 3 funding, which is the third and final, well, I shouldn't say that, it's the third, hopefully not final, allocation of money that was distributed by the federal government through the CARES Act, through the multiple different acts. In order to receive the funding, we have to apply for it, which is an application where we basically check the box to say, yes, we really want this money, and we agree to spend it in the means that are appropriate to the funding allocation. So with that, we create an ESSER 3 plan based on all of our input that we've received over the last 18 months from a variety of different places that kind of came together to this final plan. This is the largest of all the pots of money we've received district-wide. This is just over $2 million. So the delineation of the funds in the attached report, as you can see, are broken into 3 different categories. And those 3 categories are strategies for continuous and safe in-person learning, addressing lost instructional time, and a minimum of 20% of the LEA ESSER 3 funds are to be spent in this category. And in our plan, as you'll see, that's pretty much the opposite. We are spending about 80% of our funds in this category, and we're setting aside about 20% or 200, or actually less than that, about $200,000 we're setting aside for the continual purchase and upgrading of the safe indoor spaces and outdoor spaces for our students as we move forward. And so as we get into that, you'll see the first component of that, as I said, is the breakdown of the PPE and safety component. And then the second is addressing the impact of lost instructional time. And I will turn that over to Jessica now.
Okay, Michelle, thank you so much. As Michelle said, this is just one of the ESSER funds. We've been through 1, 2, and now we're into the 3rd. And this plan really just asks us to expressly and explicitly explain how we are aligning the resources with what we have been planning to spend. Most of these things you've seen already. The plan alignment column on the very left-hand side under the strategies for continuous and safe in-person learning is where I'm actually going to be doing this part of the discussion. In that column, you can see the LCAP goal that this action was associated with. So in the first one, under addressing the impact of lost instructional time, you'll see goal 3. That's related to school counseling. And as you know, we've got school counselors at each of our school sites right now, and there's a continued interest in maintaining that through the use of ESSER 3 funds. The next one is in alignment with goal 1, and that's those integrated art teachers, and they are working at each of our school sites, and that's really exciting to see that 3.3 FTE taking shape in our schools. Goal 2 is under the LCAP is the next one, the iPads for TK through 2. And I cannot tell you how excited our TK through 2 teachers and students are to see those in their hands. Learning apps and assessment tools are what we're currently using those for. And we'll expand the uses as we learn more about more of the usefulness of them in the classroom. The next one, goal 1 and 2, having to do with technology, and that is specifically looking at the Chromebooks, and those were the upgrades that were necessary to administer some of the tests that we have today. Specifically, the CAST test was a test that we could no longer support on our former Chromebooks. Next one is the partnership with the city of Capitola, and that's really just to provide students access to be on the school daycare, and that's really just a way of us maintaining our partnership with the city and extending some of those scholarship opportunities. The next one, goal 1, and that's just the smaller class sizes. As you know, not all of our classes are at the maximized levels, and that was done intentionally. So there's 1 additional FTE at each of our school sites in order to deter that. The next one is extended learning opportunities. And this one we haven't started yet, but we are on the way to starting. And I think the first class will begin in New Brighton. And this will have to do with before and or after school learning time, either on the site or in the community. The next one just has to do with additional supports for managing students. And this is just an increased ratio of adults to students when students are outside in unstructured settings. And so that mostly has to do with some of our supervision of students outside the classroom. We also have added a floating certificated sub, a full-time person, so that person can kind of take spaces of teachers who have to be out for various reasons without us worrying about the sub shortage. And then goal 1, EL Rise, is the professional learning opportunity that I talked about in my previous update in the LCAP bite, where we have 30 teacher representatives participating in multiple sections of that learning time. So that was really just kind of a brief overview of the way that we're addressing the impact of the lost instructional time. Use of any remaining funds isn't something that we've had to complete because we're still in the process of using them. The next section is just ensuring interventions or addressing students' needs, and this has to do with metrics specifically. So each of the actions, the aforementioned actions, have a way that they need to be monitored and a frequency for which they need to be monitored. So PPE, school counseling, all of the sections mentioned above have a metric that are associated with them in this part of the ESSER plan. Any questions?
Okay.
Just one additional note is the $500,000 that we are setting aside for the extended learning opportunities. ESSER 3 funds extend out longer than our ELO funds, which is state monies. And so these monies can be used in the out years, and we can extend the program over multiple years based on using state funds first and then federal funds second.
So
Oh, and I do
500,000.
want to actually go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Complete that thought, and then I have an addition.
So that's just the 500,000 is extended over fiscal years then?
It's out to 2024
Okay.
for ESSER 3, and ELO is 2023. So it just gives us, we can continue the program an additional year, basically, with the extended learning opportunities due to the ESSER 3 funds. We don't have to stop them when the state funds run out. We can continue using it further out.
That's beyond just the 500,000? That's
No,
for-
that's
no,
the
so
500,
that is
that
just
is
the
the
500 because it had,
500,000,
okay.
Okay, glad you got you on board there. Wow. All right, Bill.
So a question to you, Michelle. So I hear that the CDE got in trouble with the auditors on this, and I was wondering if there's any, problem with us.
See, I have not heard that.
Oh, yeah, the auditors said that they gave the money away and didn't check to see if it was being spent correctly or in hundreds of millions of dollars.
In regards to ESSER 3 specifically, or any of the ESSER funding? I can't speak to that. We filed all of our quarterly reports timely. The auditors reviewed from last year what was filed, not anything from the beginning of this year yet. 'Cause we
No,
haven't
no,
had
not
an audit.
our auditors.
No, I just mean our auditors to look at the compliance with the assurances that are within the program. So I take that as a good sign.
I think I can address part of that. I think I can address part of that, Phil, and this might be related to what you've heard about. Obviously, this is the ESSER 3. The ESSER 2 did not require a written plan to be submitted to the state. And because of that, there may have been some question about whether the money was spent appropriately, which probably required the ESSER 3 formalization of this plan to be something that would be board approved.
Part of the funding part of the requirements when doing the filing for the expenditures is you have to break it down by percentage in the categories that are applicable to that funding group. So, how much of this was spent on, what percentage on PPE, what percentage on extended learning, what percentage on health and mental services. And so we have to delineate that when we report under each period. So you have to stay within the confines of the assurances when reporting the funding.
Okay.
No more questions?
I'm ready to.
Yeah, no more, anything from the outside world.
Nothing on text.
I was just thinking, try not to hurt myself, so.
Nothing on email.
All right. All right, so is there a motion to approve the 2021 ESSER 3 expenditure plan?
Make a motion, Carolyn.
Carolyn, first, second?
I'll second.
Okay, Amanda, second?
Couldn't tell. Yes,
Okay,
please.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on, let's
Thank you.
approve the governance handbook, and this is the third reading.
Sure.
Keep
Sorry.
going if we need to.
I think we should keep going. I'm
There we
just
go.
kidding.
You know, actually, it is something that it could come up. I mean, if any board member finds something in there that needs to be updated or changed, it could always come up. It's not like an annual thing that has to be done, so.
That's a good point. A
Absolutely.
living document.
It's a
Yep.
living document.
I
So,
move, sorry.
long story short, it's a really important document, and I think we've gone in depth on the content and
Yeah.
the grammar and formatting appropriately.
Mhm.
This latest revision just includes some cleanup on punctuation on pages 7 and 10, and then some content rephrasing on page 7 of the handbook, towards the bottom of that page, specifically about board members getting communication and how to appropriately respond in certain situations.
Can I just say that the punctuation is going correct? The period was taken out of the quotation mark and is to be put in the quotation mark on page 7.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 of them.
My apologies on that.
Sorry, I don't mean to bring it up again, but.
No, we want
That does
to,
not require another reading, though, does it? No.
we want to get it right.
So the period needs to go before the quotation?
Inside.
Yes.
So
And what page was that on again,
Page
Karen?
7, first section, second to last paragraph, last word, individuals, period.
Right.
Got
Right
it.
next to individuals, and then second section, second to last paragraph. We have looked into it, period, end of quotation.
So
Got
the
it.
periods before? the quotation.
Yes,
Oh,
does that make
oh,
sense?
oh, man, we gotta go over the rules of this.
I think one was taken out. instead
No,
of the
no,
other one
no,
being
no,
put
I
back
should have
in.
got
I think
that.
that's
Wow,
So-
better.
okay.
I think we got the notes on that, and
No,
we'll
maybe
get
about
it fixed
So I
up.
don't need to see this document again. for a little while
Wow.
again.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I
that
think we should
input.
discuss quotation.
No,
periods.
no.
No, it's, no, I mean, okay. one. Okay, with those changes, with a period and quotation, we got those changes going. No other questions, comments, anything from the public, anybody lining up virtually?
Got 14 comments about the handbook. No, I'm just
There
kidding.
you
We
go.
don't- No, nothing on text.
Okay, all right. Is there a motion to approve our governance handbook?
I'll make the motion.
Second from the house, second from the floor.
A second.
All right. And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Always like the parliament, you know, it's fun watching those guys doing the motions. although we don't-
Please.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Those 2 corrections will be made, but I do have the signature page this evening.
Okay.
Trustees gonna be opposed to sign tonight?
No, we can sign.
I'm not opposed.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely sign.
Okay. Any correspondence? None? Okay. Any future agenda items?
I've got a question, maybe this could just be the Friday report, but what is the status of our site security? And we were gonna get cameras.
Well, that could be something we could do, have an agenda item, just as a presentation discussion about that.
And then fences and
Yeah, that's
controlled
something,
access.
actually, that's something maybe we could, throw on as future agenda items instead of chatting about it right now, because this is for future agenda items.
Mhm.
So that's something, you know, maybe we could throw on there and then get a more detailed report.
When you guys aren't busy.
Well, thank you for looking at me. Yeah, and then we have a new police chief in Capitola. It'd be nice if we invite.
Okay, we got
Chief
it.
Andy
No.
Gates. So glad we made it at some point. Anyways, is there a motion to adjourn? Okay.
She gets it.
Okay, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're done.
Don't
Thank you.
forget it.
Yeah.
We got it.
All right, thanks.
I would,